Yes, this is biblical Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And in the land of Israel, the new moon was sighted at sundown yesterday, 1.5% illuminated, and the barley was aviv in the land of Israel. So this is technically, biblically, this is biblical Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And in the time of crisis, we always bring out the big 1868 Bible, the big Bible. And it says in the 16th chapter of Deuteronomy, observe, shamar, observe. This is shamar, guard, protect the month of Ha'aviv, the Aviv, and keep the Passover unto Yehovah thy God in the month of the Aviv. Because in the month of the Aviv, this is the time that we came out of Egypt. And this is why we are to protect this, because this is the first month of the year. All of the feast of Yehovah, they are all based upon the sighting of the first sliver of the new moon and the barley being aviv in the land of Israel. And so each year we then do a calendar which reflects the astronomical events of the year when we should see the first sliver of the new moon, and it is also based upon the aviv barley. But this year, there was a real question whether the barley was going to be aviv or not. We expected it to be, but as the time grew closer, it became less and less certain. And so we produced 3 calendars this year. See, the calendars that we produce are not just a cute calendar with pictures of Mount Sinai and things that are now coming to light around the world, but every year, the biblical calendar, the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar that we produce, this is what teaches people how the Creator's time clock works. His calendar is in the heavens. It's when the first sliver of the new moon is sighted. It's when the barley in the land of Israel is declared to be aviv. And so that's the month that we celebrate Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. During the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we have the first fruit offering of the barley. That is barley parched in fire, aviv, parched in fire. And so this is what was done in the time of the temple. This is how the calendar was kept during Yeshua's ministry. And the calendar was only changed in 359 of the Common Era after the rabbis had calculated a calendar based on a mathematical logarithm, seeing how the Sanhedrin was going to be disbanded and that the Sanhedrin was no longer going to be able to establish the beginning of the month or the biblical calendar because of an edict of Rome and the death penalty that was sentenced against the rabbinic court. That is when they put in place a calculated calendar of necessity, expecting that when the Messiah comes, that we will go back to the biblical calendar. And so they have been, for many years, the rabbis in Israel, the rabbinic scholars, have been doing the sighting of the first sliver of the new moon and also the aviv barley in the land of Israel. Now, it was more than 21 years ago that Bruce Brill, former NSA in America, moved over to Israel and was part of the IDF. He was an independent reporter. And when I then went over to Israel with the astronomically corrected biblical Hebrew calendar, which Robert Scott Wadsworth and I had gone back for 5 years and established when the new moon would have been sighted in preparation for doing that year. When this then got into the hands of Bruce Brill, he saw the veracity of it because he had built his house so that he had an open roof so that he could be up on top of his roof in Tekoa, Israel, to sight the new moon every month. So here was someone that was already completely immersed in this biblical calendar, wanting to understand it. And so he published the results of the work we had done in in a Jerusalem paper, and then it made its way into the hands of the Israeli New Moon Society. Bruce and I were invited to the annual convention of the Israeli New Moon Society, and that is when the head of the society, the president, then told us that I needed to get a hold of Nehemiah Gordon, a person I had not heard of, Bruce Brill had never heard of, but it was essential because Dr. Hoffman said that there's one last thing that I have got to get right in order for this calendar to be truly the biblical calendar. And he told me at that meeting, before he got up to speak as a keynote speaker, he said that Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the month of Tishri, that is a rabbinic tradition. That is something that by tradition we put in place, but that is not the scripture. The month and the year begins in the month of the Aviv, when the barley is Aviv. He said, you need to get a hold of this person, Nehemiah Gordon, as soon as possible. The next day, at coffee time, downtown Jerusalem, that's when I met Nehemiah for the first time. We sat there for 5 hours and then agreed to meet again the next day. And Nehemiah Gordon has been absolutely instrumental in understanding not only the biblical calendar, but my work in establishing the chronology of the Gospels could not be done without accurately establishing the ancient biblical calendar that was in place in the first century. And that couldn't have been done until Neil Armstrong put the first prismatic, the first of 5 prismatic mirrors on the moon that was then hit with gigawatt laser beams. And for over 50 years, they did the calculations. And so we could then establish the lunation period. We could go back in time, and it was at that time, after 38 years of working on the chronology of the Gospels and the biblical calendar, that we were able to establish these things. And it turned out that our calculations had matched exactly what was seen by the rabbinic court in Israel that was established to hear the new moon witnesses. And so every year we do the calendar, and this year we had to do 3 because it looked like the barley wasn't going to be Aviv. And so we went back to work. Our entire team produced another whole entire calendar with all the mathematical calculations that it takes to do so. But then in doing so, we saw that we really can't determine whether the new moon of the next month was going to be able to be sighted, because it was right on the edge. Only under the most perfect conditions would it be able to be sighted. And so then what we did is had to go and do another year of calendars with an alternate dates, because if the new moon wasn't sighted on that night that we hoped it would be, then that would throw the entire calendar off. So we produced 3 calendars. It turns out that now that the barley has been declared Aviv in the land of Israel by competent people. These are people that have been working on this for 20 years. They live in the land of Israel, they speak Hebrew, they read the scriptures in Hebrew, and they're not Johnny-come-latelys that have come from America to establish their own new calendar. We see this year after year that people just come up with the most bizarre ideas, lunar Sabbaths and everything else, because they want to be special. They want to do something special. Well, I think Yeshua is the one who did something special, and I just really wanted to understand his life and ministry and to then be able to project that calendar, roll it back in time, and that is what we've done. That's how I was able to do the chronological Gospels. And so this time of year is very special. We are guarding. At great cost, we guard the month of the Aviv. We produce 3 calendars just so that we cover every possible circumstance of the Aviv barley and when the new moon is sighted the very year. And so now with this word that we know that March 25th at sunset, the barley was Aviv, and that began the new this, and it's just before noon on the 26th. That means the sun is not set yet in Israel, so this is still here. So where you are, before the sun sets tonight, it is still the new year. And so now you know how to calculate the Passover. And this year, the Passover will occur on the very same days of the week that it did with the Passover in 28 of the Common Era. That's going to give us a wonderful time of getting together. So join me, because I'm going to be broadcasting live a Passover with my biblical garments, with my staff in my hand, with my sandals on. We're going to be eating it in haste, and I'm going to be explaining these things together the very night of Passover, which this year will be Wednesday night. Which we'll be eating unleavened bread and bitter herbs. And then the weekend, we have already established an entire weekend of festivities that we're going to do online for you. So the first one we do on Wednesday is going to be open to the entire world. All people have to do is get the michaelrood.tv app on their Roku device, Amazon devices, anything that that connects up to the internet, michaelrood.tv, and join us for the live presentation of Passover. And then those who have registered for the grand presentation, the weekend following, this is when I'm going to do another Passover. But, you know, every time I get to tell it, I love to tell the story. I do it differently every time. And so that night, I don't even know exactly where we're going, because I've got 2 weeks to dream this up, and I'm going to have such a great time. I love doing Passover. It was more than 15 years ago that I determined that I am going to go into exile. I'm no longer going to stay at my home in the Galilee and celebrate Passover there, overlooking the Sea of Galilee and the Golan Heights, but I am going to go out and share the wealth. And I have not been sorry for it. I have been on several continents being able to do Passover with the saints, and I'm looking forward to doing it with you then. So thanks for being with me on this biblical new year. And remember to get your calendars. They just went to the printers today. Shalom, Torah fans. Since you love the truth, give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon, and I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.